Welcome back, Rainmakers, to the Crypto Rain channel. I'm your host, Jay Murph, and today we have the CEO of Devvio, an amazingly fast blockchain that you may not have heard of yet, but you will be hearing a lot about it in the near future. So without any further ado, why don't we bring on Tom Anderson, the CEO of Devvio. Tom, you with us?
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, I appreciate you for joining us. Now, Devvio, I had never heard of you prior to 4 weeks ago, and when my good friend Angel put me in touch with one of your advisors, I was, let's just say, skeptical that such a big company out there with so much going on with the fastest blockchain I'd ever heard of in my life, and I had never even heard of you.
Yeah, yeah, I think we've generally focused on the enterprise blockchain space. We,
Yeah,
we started about 4.5 years ago, and we focused on real business use from the beginning. How can you use blockchain to work at global level scale, enterprise level customers? And given our focus, on the enterprise space, we didn't really focus in the crypto area as much. So a lot of people in the crypto space haven't heard of us. We've kind of dipped our toe in the water in the crypto space a little bit and kind of kept an eye on it, but it really hasn't been our focus. So.
yeah, very different approach. What I'm used to is people say, hey, we have this great idea and we hope to build this amazing blockchain. So let's go out there and sell a whole bunch of tokens so that then we can fund the development. And, 4 or 5 years later, we hope to have a viable product that can actually solve some solutions out there. And so you had been in the space for a long time. I'd never heard about you. You had never gone that route. So that's why myself and others had never heard about you. You self-funded through yourself and people that you knew to have not only a minimum viable product, but a very viable product out there. And so it literally took me days just to wrap my mind around this new blockchain competitor out there with such an amazing solution that had already real life applications going on. And I just was blown away. I try to keep some part of my mind reserved for I don't know everything, and everything that I tend to be very opinionated, but I do leave that space open because every opinion I have is based on, okay, these are the facts as I understand them. So when I take in new facts, I'm like, I have to update my thinking. My goodness.
Yeah,
Whew.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been skeptical of Devvio in general. We have a fellow that is our chief revenue officer, Mike DiPetrillo.
Yeah.
He led the blockchain work at VMware, grew their blockchain from 2 people to 85 people, starting in 2015. And the very first thing he said when he first started learning about us is, 8 million transactions per second, 1/1 millionth the cost of Ethereum. Sure you can, you and 100 other white papers, right? So he was pretty skeptical as well. So he flew out and met with us, sat down. We went through everything that Devvio does, and his kind of reaction after he learned what we do is, wow, this is elegant in its simplicity, and he got it right away. He's a businessman, but he's technical enough to really understand the technical side of things. And so as we went through, he described all of the problems that he had run into at VMware. So again, a $9 billion tech company, and he in the end said, you guys are 3 years ahead of anybody else in the space. You're beyond the roadmaps of anybody else that I've seen in the enterprise blockchain space. So it's the type of thing I think people generally have been skeptical until they do their due diligence, and then universally when people do their due diligence, they always come to the same conclusions. So I'll just give a tiny bit of background, I think, on Devvio too. I think
Sure.
that kind of helps, ground the conversation. So we started, 4.5 years ago, and saw an enormous opportunity. To me, blockchain is one of the few technologies we'll see in our lifetime that fundamentally changes computing on par with the internet. Where the internet was a disruptive platform that lets people transfer data, blockchain is a disruptive platform that lets people transfer value. And if you look at it at that most basic level, that's where we saw world-changing implications. But the challenge, though, is there was no blockchain that really solved all the problems you have to solve to use it at enterprise scale and global level deployment. There were huge problems in scalability, privacy, fraud, theft, and loss, stability. Probably the biggest is cost. And if you want to build a real business in the blockchain space and again, work with enterprise customers, you have to solve all of those problems. So given that there was no technology that solved all those problems, we designed our own blockchain protocol from scratch. And then with that, we came up with our own consensus mechanism, which is how blocks are added to a blockchain. And then with that, we solved the sharding problem. So sharding, of course, is a big area of research in blockchain. It's basically parallelizing the processing of a blockchain. And Devvio has solved that problem. And so 3 years ago, we created an alpha level network. And the alpha level network, we benchmarked at 8 million transactions per second. That's on chain on a global public blockchain with distributed consensus. and then probably more important than throughput is cost. Our costs are on the order of 1/1,000,000th the cost of Ethereum. So what would cost $1,000 worth of transactions on Ethereum, in gas, only costs $1 on our blockchain. So we've pretty dramatically changed the boundary conditions around both throughput and cost, which are two of the biggest factors, I think, for blockchain to really reach its full potential. And then probably more important than throughput and cost is the flexibility of our system. So we created this, again, sharding solution. That's Devvio's secret sauce. That's the thing that Devvio does that nobody else in the world does. So we can create any number of independent blockchains with our own validators, all using distributed consensus. So we can create any number of those independent blockchains or shards. They can seamlessly interact with each other. And then we can have those shards custom designed for any given use case. And that's a hugely powerful concept. That's actually, we found, more important at this point than the throughput and the cost is that flexibility. So you could have literally thousands of shards in thousands of different legal jurisdictions where every shard is tailored for that legal jurisdiction. Or you could have, shards that are tailored to privacy that, communicate with a public backbone. Or you could have shards that are tailored to specific technical needs. If you want to have like shards that, implement NFTs, for example, we've been basically building an NFT system for, 4.5 years now, right? So you could have shards that are tailored to work well with data volume instead of data throughput, things like that. So it's a very flexible system, and it's been a really nice way to implement a system when it comes to actually deploying with customers.
So in layman's terms, like a lot of times, a lot of companies out there are building one big blockchain essentially, and they might use sharding as their solution to help with their transaction per second to break it down. What you're talking about is kind of creating little, shards so that, one of the problems governments have with public blockchains is that they want control of the servers that it's on. And so they can't use like Ethereum, and they can't use maybe Polkadot or even Cardano to build stuff on because their regulatory compliance requires certain things. And not only the governments themselves, but the companies that do dealings with them. And so essentially they can't use those blockchains, but with yours, you can build specific shards for them. And if it makes sense, those shards can interact and communicate with other shards.
Yeah. So governance is, I think, one of the key design criteria for our system from the beginning. Okay. Again, we had an enterprise focus, real business use. And if you're working with enterprise customers or governments, as you said, you have to design the governance of the system to work in ways that they're comfortable with. So the idea that you could have nodes in North Korea, that's driving the operations of your system, that just doesn't fly with a lot of governments and enterprises. Just doesn't work. And so our system is a public blockchain. It's not private the way IBM has developed their Hyperledger Fabric approaches, for example. And it's distributed, right? So it's distributed in its operations, but it is a permissioned system. And again, that's the type of governance that you need. So you have, for example, IBM and Hyperledger Fabric generally have developed private permission systems, and then you have Ethereum and Bitcoin that are public permissionless systems. Ours is a public permission system, and I would argue that really the protections that you need in order to have use blockchain and fulfill kind of the vision of what everybody is excited about blockchain becoming. The innate kind of characteristics of blockchain itself is what enables the protections. the blockchain itself is immutable because every block is hashed, with the block before it. So if you change a bit anywhere in the history, the entire blockchain from that point on changes, right? So you have an immutable blockchain. And then our system, same as other systems, are held across many different computers. So you can't change the entire blockchain. Any mathematically valid transaction is going to go through. So there's no central authority overseeing transactions, on the DevX blockchain. And you have, therefore, all the protections you need that implement a system that lives up to the ideals of the original Bitcoin white paper. The idea that you could have a system where no central authority oversees transactions, any two parties can independently audit a transaction, anybody can independently audit the entire chain. So the Bitcoin white paper is brilliant. That was my inspiration. I read it, back in 2016-ish. I had followed Bitcoin since 2011-ish. I've always been interested in digital currencies. I actually had a website that had a digital currency in kind of the mid 2000s, but I didn't really look at building a business until 2016-ish. When I finally got my arms around Bitcoin and what it was looking to do, it was amazing. It's just amazing concepts, amazing algorithms. Just really kind of an inspirational goals as well. But I think one thing a lot of people don't realize is proof of work is, primarily a mechanism to prevent collusion. And so, there's other ways to handle that problem. And if part of your design criteria in a blockchain is that anybody can come in and run this system, that's incredibly difficult design criteria. And so that's part of the brilliance of Bitcoin and proof of work. But again, you don't have to have a system that anybody can come in and run to get the main protections that Bitcoin has. So our approach, I think, is the best of both worlds. It's cost effective, scalable, still public, no central authority overseeing transactions, and so it lives kind of to the longer term ideals of what I think Bitcoin was really designed around.
It's fascinating. What you've done is fascinating as well. So I do have some questions I wrote up beforehand.
Sure.
So you read the white paper in 2016, and what got you started with creating your own solution? I guess what kind of inspired that?
So I had started a company that had some intellectual property, in particular one particularly potentially valuable patent, and it was built around developing and distributing software. And one of the things blockchain, again, is really good at is maintaining representations of value. And so we started looking at how can we leverage the growth of that particular patent and that IP, with this new kind of exciting area that's coming up, the blockchain, blockchain technology. And so that's what started it. But then when we started actually, looking to build a business, again, there was no solution that solved all the problems you need to solve to really build a real business, and have solutions to the problems that businesses rely on being solved to really implement real solutions. And so that's where we, because we didn't have that, solution, we designed and built it ourselves. And it's interesting because we started building the Dev blockchain, DevX, around kind of that goal of building this developer asset solution. But then the blockchain project itself just took on a life of its own, and really we found there's just much more opportunity in just creating the protocol overall. So
now you started in 2016. You could have written up a white paper in 2017, had a big ICO, and went out and sought funds and raised all this money, and then the public would be completely aware of you. In fact, it would be like, oh, when is Devvio going to do this and that? And, you have already survived what we call the crypto winter anyway. But you chose to go a different route overall. Tell us what you factored in on your decision with that.
Sure. Yeah. So the overall goals of Devvio the whole time, ever since our inception, was building real business, in using blockchain technology.
Yeah.
And so I looked into the crypto space. I looked into doing an ICO in 2017-ish. And I never really found a path forward that I was comfortable with. There was one investor that actually was going to invest $2 million, and they said we could go and do an ICO on an exchange in Asia. the exchange will get a bunch of tokens, they'll drive the value up, and they'll sell them. And it's like the kind of stuff that you're really not supposed to do. And so we turned down a lot of potential money because I wasn't comfortable with how we're doing it. Again, if you're going to build a real business, you build it in a solid way from the beginning, and you design it around principles that are going to work within regulatory compliance. You don't take risks that are going to threaten the business. And so I just never really saw a path forward. So then you fast forward to today, the idea of selling tokens really kind of died for a while, during crypto winter, and there wasn't as much opportunity to launch a token. But what we're doing now, especially with a lot of the excitement in the crypto space again, and especially all the progress Devvio has made, the progress we're making with customers, just all of the technical progress we've made, I could describe that more as well. But we started a new ESG, environmental, social, and governance related effort that has a cryptocurrency associated with it. And so now we're looking at how we could get back involved in the more crypto side of the blockchain world as opposed to the enterprise side. So it's kind of come full circle, and we're exploring it again now.
Yeah. So in other words, you might do a token sale sometime later this year for a token built on your technology. It's probably pretty early, but do you have a forecast of what month that might be down the road?
So it depends a little bit on how things go with the lawyers is part of it, right? Overall, if I were to look at the big picture of what we're doing with the Dev ESG effort and what we're looking to do with the overall DevX blockchain platform, I would describe that I think the entire blockchain space can 100x from where it is right now if it embraces regulatory compliance. If you can get institutional investors in a big scale, where they're not just dipping their toes, but they're really heavily involved, when you can have an SEC approved ETF, when you can assure that Bitcoin isn't being mined by adversary countries like North Korea, when you can assure that cryptocurrencies aren't being used for money laundering and terrorism, and governments will allow much deeper interactions. All of those things, again, I think are going to drive things 100x. So I would like for Devvio to be a leader in that. I'd like to see us as the leader grow, taking the crypto space out of the Wild West into the future of what blockchain is really going to become. And we have unique technology to be able to do it. Probably the thing I'm most proud of at Devvio and everything that we've done is our team. We have really a world-class team. So we have the team that can take us to that next level. And so with all of that, then, the DevX platform really I see as being kind of a next generation, a replacement for what Ethereum has done, where we're addressing the cost issues, the scalability issues, the governance, challenges. I've spoken to several companies that have even looked at, other second generation types of protocols, after, depending on how you call it, second or third generation, right? I've heard different people call it different ways, but, after Ethereum, and the governance challenges there don't suit what they want to do if they want to really start again building real businesses. So we address a lot of these big challenges, and then we're also focusing a lot of those efforts, not all of them, but it's really a beachhead, and a lot of what we're developing is around the ESG space, which also is an enormous opportunity. The ESG, we've all been in the crypto space, right? And you look at back in 2012-ish or kind of in that range, like I wish I would have bought a bunch of Bitcoin back then, right? Or even earlier. ESG right now is like Bitcoin in 2012. It's kind of that level of opportunity. And so mixing an ESG focused, where you're able to sell things like carbon offsets and other types of environmental technologies and things around social nature, letting people control their own value, letting people control their own identity information, transparent governing. A lot of these things are real strengths of blockchain. So having this kind of longer term crypto focus, taking the crypto space out of the Wild West, tied in with this initial beachhead in the ESG space, I think is a match made in heaven. So the overall Dev ESG effort, I think is really exciting.
That's awesome. Now, many of the viewers probably won't know what ESG is. I know when we first spoke about a month ago, I had heard about it a little bit, and you filled me in there, and I did some more research, and I was like, and having worked in the corporate consulting world at Accenture, I know how big certain compliance things are, and when you talked about it, it really went off in my mind of what a huge sector that is. and they're going to be looking for companies that can help other companies become compliant in there, not out of mandatory compliance, but out of voluntary compliance. That will probably come from social pressure. Would you share with everyone what ESG is?
Sure. So ESG is environmental, social, and governance, and it's a category of business development that relates to doing the right thing in those categories. And it's been a concept that's been around for 20 years of various names. It's only a little more recently that's really kind of become known as ESG. But it's been, I think, a loss, a cost center for businesses up till now, and you spend money and maybe get some marketing value, but things have changed over the past year or so. You have companies like BlackRock, the world's biggest asset holder, who has said we're not going to carry a company's stock unless they're responsible from an ESG perspective. And when you start to have those kinds of things happen, that it makes it serious, right? That's where it hits the bottom line of companies. So all of the Global 1,000, the biggest companies in the world, all have ESG efforts at this point, and they have somebody in charge of ESG. And then you have companies, just as an example, like Apple, who has said we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. And so they need to take activities that remove their carbon footprint. But even after they get a ways down that road, they're still going to have at least according to kind of their estimates 25% of their carbon footprint they have now. So they think they can improve, but that last 25% they need to buy things like carbon offsets to offset what they're already doing. And their Apple is taking it so seriously that they have a lot of their executive bonuses are based on ESG criteria and goals. So all the people running Apple will get bonuses if Apple hits its ESG goals, right? That's an example of how serious it is, right? And so when you look at what blockchain can do in the ESG space, I would argue the biggest challenge in the entire ESG space is trust and is provenance of data. And that's one of the places where blockchain really shines. If Apple is buying a carbon offset from somebody else, somebody maybe that puts solar panels in that's offsetting, petro fuel, usage, then how does Apple know that what they're buying is real? So our system can keep all the provenance of the data, how the asset, that carbon offset was originally created, where it came from, exactly when it was created, that it's not being double spent. And then you can have verifiers and regulatory bodies that give their verifications and do scientific analysis and things like that. Those can be NFTs on the system. The asset itself can be an NFT. I don't mean NFT in the sense of kind of the hype right now around collectibles and stuff, more just NFT means non-fungible token. So on our blockchain, we could take any type of data that's basically a JSON structure and create it as an NFT token on the blockchain. So you can create an NFT token that represents the asset, NFT tokens that represent all of the verifications of that asset, and then when Apple buys it, they see all of the provenance of that data, know that what they're buying is real, and that's huge. So there's this tsunami of buying pressure coming up, where companies want to buy ESG assets and show that they're being ESG responsible. And then there's lots of exciting new companies that are creating ESG technologies, and we've been working with a bunch of them, companies that can reduce pretty dramatically the carbon output in a number of different industries, companies that can give alternatives for energy, companies, again, that, there's the S and the G as well, companies that help, let people control their value and the value they create in their identity and govern transparency, like I said earlier, and so all of that can be tracked on the blockchain as well. So all of that really, I think, is going to be the foundation of what this DevvE ESG platform creates. And again, the ESG space is just one of the biggest opportunities coming up in general.
I think you've identified that right, and I don't know anybody who's really making inroads into that. And essentially you're right in the middle between buyers that want to buy, sellers that want to sell, but then verifying that what they're buying is legitimate, because blockchain is the best thing to really track that and verify from beginning to end that what they're buying is real and legitimate.
Yep. Yeah, and the overall DevvE ESG effort started with kind of that realization that we have a technology that can handle data provenance. And data provenance is very important in this enormous up and coming field. And ESG already is huge. Like a lot of the biggest SPACs and funds that have been being created are around ESG. People on the business side of things that are seeing BlackRock make statements like they've made, understand the ramifications there and how big it's going to be. So ESG already is huge, but it's just going to get bigger. So that's how we got started. But then the concept evolved, and so we overall said there's a lot more we could do. We can create a platform that other companies can launch, and if we're doing things in a legally compliant way, where you can not run into the problems, that you see a number of companies being sued by the SEC for having, token offerings that they say are securities offerings that weren't compliant. If we're doing things in a regulatory compliant way, we have a platform that addresses Ethereum's challenges, but then also is regulatory compliant. I think you can start to have many more mainstream companies, not just the DeFi stuff that's going on right now, but companies that are more traditional companies feel comfortable getting into the same type of activities that happened with ICOs and now with DeFi. So this overall DevX platform, I think, is a powerful concept there. And then there's two other legs to a stool. So there's three legs overall, to a stool, so to speak, right? So there's the DevX platform. We're also putting together a venture fund. So on our team, we have two world-class venture capitalists. So Ray Quintana on our team was one of two general partners at the best performing early stage venture capital company in the country, according to Preqin. So really kind of world-class resume. And then we also have Will Stewart on our team, and Will has an amazing resume. He's overall invested over 400 companies. He's done 7 venture funds, and he's invested over $5 billion into companies. So we have two world-class venture capitalists that are going to help us build the DevESG fund that invests into companies that are launching on the DevX platform. And then the third piece is our Devi Cryptocurrency. So Devi is the E in DevE is for ESG, right? So it's DevE, and Devi incentivizes all of the activities on the platform. So just like with Ethereum and ETH, if you want to invest into a company, you do it through DevE, same as you do with ETH for DeFi projects, right? And then you can also stake DevE, and if you stake it, then you can earn interest. If you stake it, you can get first rights, to invest into some of the hot companies that we think are going to be launching on DevX. You'll be able to, if you stake it, also earn airdrops of these other companies that are launching. And so you get this virtuous cycle where the fund, creates credibility for the coin, the cryptocurrency DevE, and the platform. The platform creates deal flow for for the fund, and also credibility for the cryptocurrency, because lots of companies are going to be launching, and then DevE itself incentivizes everything that happens. So it's again this virtuous spiral where they all kind of support each other. And then the Devi cryptocurrency itself, I find very exciting. It's one of the more exciting things I've worked on since I started Devvio. So it's got the same kind of store of value characteristics as Bitcoin. And we're kind of making the point that it's an alternative to Bitcoin. So it's got the 21 million allotted, issuance. It's got solutions to, I think, two of Bitcoin's main challenges. Again, Bitcoin's brilliant. It was our original inspiration. But I think there's aspects of its design that weren't designed for this scale. Like I don't think anybody back in 2009 would have thought that Bitcoin would have the energy usage that it has today. And that it would
presently, right?
Yeah, right. It's more than like it's all. I think I've read it's almost a top 20 country. It's nearing 1% of the world's energy use. It's actually on a trajectory that where all of the Bitcoin servers will use more energy than all of the rest of the world's servers combined. It's not there yet, but it's kind of on that trajectory. Right? That's crazy, right? And proof of work literally is wasting energy, proving that you've done that work, and so when things get to that scale, like it wasn't really designed for that. And so Devi is about 1/1,000,000th the energy usage of Bitcoin. And then every Devi that's sold, 90% of that goes into investing into these companies that, really can have a huge impact on the world. And so it's really kind of a nice philosophy. So yeah, we're really excited about the Devi cryptocurrency and how that fits in with the whole DevESG platform.
Now I have another screen pulled up here where that I have your team so that people can see on your website and the team. You can't see it from what you're presently looking at, but I've got your team pulled up here so that people can become familiar with your team, because when I'm looking at a project, one of the first things I do is I look not only at the CEO, but I look at who have they surrounded themselves with. And you've hit on some of these people. Would you walk through it with everyone, kind of who you brought together on your team?
Sure. Yeah. As I said earlier, the team is the thing I'm most proud of everything we've done at Devvio. And it's such a great group of people to work with. Um, and such a great, kind of culture at Devvio, and just a nice dynamic. So it's neat that you have such kind of world-class team members, but it also is such a just fun dynamic to be working in. It's because everybody really sees the vision of what we're doing. A lot of our team members really could be doing anything they want at this point, and they believe in the big vision of what Devvio is doing. So we have Ray Quintana, my partner. He was, as I described, one of two general partners at the best performing early stage venture capital company in the country, according to Preqin. Ray has described Devvio as the best opportunity he's seen in his career across 20 years of frontline tech. And so Devvio is the only company that he invested with his feet rather than his money. And he's the perfect partner to grow Devvio with, because he's as a VC, he did 30 co-investments with the Global 500, another 60 partnerships, joint ventures, projects with the Global 500. And so he's the perfect kind of person you want to grow an enterprise scale business with. I mentioned Will Stewart as well. Again, very impressive resume. He's cream of the crop even as VCs go. He's invested over $5 billion into tech companies. And so just amazing fellow and very bright. Also very, pleasant, nice to work with, just a really nice guy, like everybody at Devvio. So that's really neat. Mike, I already described, Mike DiPetrillo. So led the work at VMware, grew them from 2 to 85 people. And he's the kind of guy that could go to any blockchain project in the world. And again, started from a point of skepticism, found out what we did. And we went to dinner, the night after he flew out here, and we kind of went through everything. And he said, I want to join you guys, whatever it takes, And so within a few days, he was working full time at Devvio, and he's been amazing growing a lot of our business and revenue and contracts. We also, and Mike also is very rare in the world. There's not very many people who have successfully deployed enterprise scale blockchain projects. That's a very rare kind of set of expertise. And so not only is he such a critical person on our team, but he's also a good, point of reference, right? When someone like that picks a project like ours, and he'll even say, like, especially when he first started, everybody's asking, like, why did you start up with this little startup? He's like, because they've got the best technology in the world, And then similarly, we've also got Chris Church on our team. Chris also is one of those folks that's got very rare expertise in enterprise blockchain. He was the director of business development at another enterprise blockchain company called DA. And then started working with us. Also thought we were years ahead of everybody else. He really liked the focus we had on revenue. That was one of the things that really drove him, and working on real projects with real customers. And before DA, Chris was the CEO of Swift with the Americas, the international payments company. So very impressive resume, very impressive fellow. And we've been hiring other new folks that we're going to be announcing. So we've overall built the entire team from the top down. It really is a world-class team. Like almost everybody on our team is the type of person where you could build a company around even just one of them, right? And we've got a bunch of those types of folks on our team. So
yeah, thank you. And I'll put a link to the website down in the video description, so anybody who wants to link at it and look through it and get familiar with it, they can. Now, what's a little bit different that you've done, apart from having the fastest blockchain out there, you went through a solution to make it interoperable. Ethereum often says, oh, there's 200,000 developers who know how to program in Solidity, so we have the largest distribution of people who can program with Ethereum. And so Cardano went a different route, and they went to Haskell because there's already a huge development community that knows that language. And you went an even different route.
Yeah. So again, from the very beginning, this is the theme of all the development. We said, how can you use this for real world business use? How can you easily onboard companies? And Ethereum, is also brilliant in its execution, right? It's a really amazing project. It's really a cool concept that they developed. Solidity, you have on-chain, a Turing complete, virtual machine. But the challenge though with that is it's not practical for kind of real world implementations. It's very difficult to take an on-chain, Turing complete virtual machine and make it secure at scale, for example. And I've had a lot of people say like, oh, nobody, this, especially a few years ago, you get that less now, but say, oh, well, you'll never be able to catch up to Ethereum. They've got 200,000 Solidity developers. Well, we've got a RESTful API that any web developer in the world can instantly work with. So we've got 20 million developers that can instantly integrate with our system with a few HTTP post commands. And so we built our system for this easy onboarding where anybody can easily integrate with the system. There's a RESTful API command where you can define a type of NFT, for example, and it can be any JSON wrapper. And then there's another NFT or another RESTful API command that says you can instantiate that NFT. And then there's another API command where you can define a fungible token. And so it's easy to create the things, and then once you've created them, there's API calls to transfer them, and then we have smart contracts accessible through the API commands as well. So we have this concept called recipes where you could say this token plus this token combine and it creates a new token. So they're kind of logical building blocks, and again, when you implement it that way, you can do right off the bat 95% of what anybody would ever want to do on a blockchain, kind of with what's there at a base level. And then if you need to develop new API endpoints and new smart contracts, it's simple to do. It's all written in C++ under the hood, and so it's straightforward to build new API calls. And the end result then is that you can just link in with existing web interfaces instantly. And so again, it's 2017 that we created that alpha level network and did our initial benchmarking. So you say, well, what have you been doing since then, right? So what we've been doing since then is this kind of productization where you make it easy to deploy. And making a blockchain work with a RESTful API, that's the most difficult technical challenge we've overcome. That was an incredibly difficult problem, making it where it does work with the RESTful API and you can just, so easily integrate with it. And so that's a big part of what we've been doing. And that's where I think we've still maintained our lead time. And I think as we're launching it and getting more visibility, we've been focused more on sales and specific customers up until this point, but we're at a point now where we're going to start creating more visibility. And I think once people start seeing like how easy it is to integrate with, and again, any web developer can just instantly integrate, I think the sky's the limit. I think things could really start to take off from here.
So that's amazing. I mean, one of my questions when I was first meeting you and asking more questions was, well, shoot, why doesn't everybody integrate with the RESTful API if that gives them access to so many people? But I, at the time, didn't realize the magnitude of the problem that is to solve, and essentially took your team 3 years to get that fully functional and working very well.
Yeah, it's not so easy to do. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Let's see. Now, you did go another route that's different than most companies, though you're starting to see a lot more of this because people realize the downside of not doing this, and you protected your solutions with patents.
Yeah. IP has always been a cornerstone of everything that I've personally done. The very first thing we did 4.5 years ago was submit hundreds and hundreds of pages of patents, everything we could possibly think of related to kind of enterprise, level use. And so I would say there's kind of 4 main categories of IP protection, and there's a lot of other smaller, but kind of 4 main, you might call it blocking level sets of IP. And I think we'll be therefore a leader in the IP space, in blockchain, because we focused on real business use earlier than most, right? And came up with some really innovative ways to implement things earlier than most. And so one is privacy. I would describe our privacy solution as true privacy other than court-ordered transparency. And so any kind of crypto project that's really trying to build a real business and then have it be regulatory compliant, I think will necessarily infringe on that patent. We've also got our fraud, theft, and loss protections. And each of fraud, theft, and loss, each of those 3 is its own kind of logic problem. And so we developed at a core level, at a consensus level, solutions for fraud, theft, and loss. Let me just describe the loss as an example, just because it's kind of, again, a fun logic problem. So, we've all heard the stories of people lose their hard drive and it's in a landfill and it's got $150 million worth of Bitcoin on it, right? Or you have a private key on a sticky note, and who knows what happened to that sticky note? Or I mean, there's been all sorts of problems, and then there's massive thefts, hundreds of millions of dollars stolen without recourse, and everybody in the crypto space goes, yeah, that's just kind of how this space is, right? It's just crazy. You can't build real businesses around that. So we saw that challenge, and so what happens if you lose your private key? So what we did is we designed where you can have what's called a DevProtect token in your wallet, in your public address. And that DevProtect token defines other wallets that can sign a transaction that lets you move all of the assets out to a new wallet. So if you lose your private key, then you can have, for example, 3 out of 5 of your friends, or 2 out of 3, or whatever, or a custodial company, or whatever, send a transaction that the validators will verify is correct, that moves all of the assets into a new wallet. So if you lose your private key, then there's recourse and you can move everything out. So that itself is pretty compelling, right? Building into a blockchain at the core level, a mechanism to allow you to not lose everything. And if you even just send crypto today, it's like kind of nerve-wracking, right? Like things can go wrong and you're SOL, right? Things are just like stuff's just gone, right? So then that begs the question is, well, what happens if you have somebody else that has this mechanism that you can transfer assets out? What's to keep them from stealing it? Well, let's say you set it up with 3 of your friends and you make a bunch of money, and they're like, do you see how much money he made? And they want to steal it, right? So again, in reality, most of the time it'll be custodial companies or businesses that provide these services. But just for the sake of an example, you have 5 friends and you get 3 of them, and 3 of those friends get together and they want to steal, right, from your wallet. Well, what happens with this DevProtect token is if anything gets transferred into a new wallet, then it's held there for 30 days and it's locked and it can't be moved. And during those 30 days, at any point, if you didn't lose your private key, you can reverse the transaction. All the assets go back into your wallet and that DevProtect token gets deleted. And so there's recourse if you lose your assets. But then there's also no real trust, because if you didn't lose your private key, then you can reverse somebody trying to abuse that mechanism in the blockchain. And so it's in the scheme of things a pretty straightforward concept, but it solves one of the big problems of blockchain, right? So we have a privacy, IP, fraud, theft, and loss protections. The theft and fraud are different, again, logic problems, but they're also kind of fun problems to solve. We have identity solution that has some powerful IP. Our identity solution in general is pretty compelling. It's an idea that you create any number of tokens that represent personally identifiable information. So not just who you are, but where you've been, what you've done, who you were with, right? And you can have third parties verify your information. So third party can verify your KYC analysis. They could do a KYC process. At the end of that, then they give you a KYC token. And then if you need to use that KYC token, you're in full control of it. And you can send a transaction to someone else that gives irrefutable mathematical proof that this third party verified this information about you. But you're the one that's in control of using that KYC information, right? So to me, that's the future of identity. It's self-sovereign control of that identity information, but still third-party verifications. And the collection of many different tokens, like one represents a degree you got at a university. Another represents, what you've been doing on a dating site that shows you're not a bot, right? And so you could have a large collection of these tokens. So we've got IP there, and then we've got IP around our scalability and sharding solution too, of course. So
it's amazing all these solutions that you've already been solving problems for. Being in the real estate business for so many years, and on the investment side, I just see like the inheritance problem, right? And I've been thinking about that related to Bitcoin. What happens when somebody has massive amounts of assets and they just pass away? Right now, there's no custody solution to hand that off. It's kind of like if I died, my wife has to know how to access everything and stuff. So
yep.
I love that you're developing real world solutions to that it can be set up in a safe way so that things can be passed on because none of us know when we die, right? And right
Yep.
now, if somebody passes away, essentially most of that value just gets trapped and stuck that nobody else knows how to access.
Yeah, yeah. If they don't know how to access, you're really in trouble. So that loss solution that I described, that's a great example of it. That's you would use that solution for inheritances, right? And you could have again third-party custodians that they won't transfer unless you can prove that someone passed away. But then when they do, they can transfer it. And then again, if somebody tried to abuse that, then there's recourse. You can undo the transaction. So it's just a good overall solution for those types of problems.
Yeah, let me see if I appreciate all your time that you're giving us. Um, and
Yeah.
just to let the viewers know, I'm not unbiased towards Devvio. I made an investment myself in the company because just after I went through my disbelief session myself and like trying to wrap my mind around it and asking questions and meeting with Tom, I was like, I love what they're doing. And so I personally got involved in investment in the company itself so that everyone knows with full disclosure, like I'm not unbiased towards that, but I'm bringing it to all of you because, I mean, there's a reason that I wanted to invest in this company versus all the other things out there. I mean, my mind was blown when I really, I guess, after I met you and I asked a bunch of questions and it really sunk in that, wow, this is real, and I just still blew me away that I was so unaware of the company altogether for so long. But
You've taken the same trajectory that all of our team members took to a person. Every single one of them started out saying like, "This is a bunch of BS." It's nobody's solved all of blockchain's main problems, right? There's no way that you can do millions of transactions per second. And then people do their due diligence to start learning about it. And to a person, everybody on our team has basically said, "The more I learned, the better it got." And so you've kind of followed that same trajectory. I've personally seen many times.
now, let me ask you, where as a company would you want to be in 4 years from now?
So, really, one thing nobody's ever really accused Devvio is having small ambitions, right? And so I'd like to see our Devi cryptocurrency being a world-leading cryptocurrency, a top 10 at least. I personally think that when you combine kind of ESG focus and then the store of value that Bitcoin has, the energy usage, the ability to have purchases of Devi, go towards invest 90% going towards investing in these ESG companies. I think it's got a lot of characteristics that I think could drive value, even beyond Bitcoin. So that's one of the goals and hopes, right? Is that we can create kind of that level of cryptocurrency. I'd also like to see our platform really become the backbone for a lot of just major up and coming industries, like IoT, for example. I think one of the biggest challenges for the entire IoT space, Internet of Things, is multi-party collaboration. And that's one of the things blockchain is really good at. And another big challenge with IoT is provenance of data. And then another huge challenge is security. And so blockchain as a technology, especially with our type of governance, our scalability, our cost effectiveness, like you can't really use like one of the biggest challenges in general in IoT is security, and blockchain is very good at security, but it's not until you reach our throughput and cost effectiveness that you can apply blockchain to IoT. But with our solution now, suddenly you can. And so I'd like to see us become, the world's backbone for IoT applications. I'd also like to see where we become the world's backbone for managing assets. And when you have the philosophy of having literally thousands of shards across thousands of legal jurisdictions, and all of those shards are custom designed for that legal jurisdiction, and then any cross shard and therefore cross border transactions can be run through smart contracts, and you have governance that can be tailored to any of those areas. You can have GDPR compliant shards in Europe. You could have HIPAA compliant shards in the US. Those types of things. That's the type of infrastructure you need. That's the type of design that you need to have that scale of kind of allowing people to manage assets on a trusted platform. And our vision is a big vision of what we want to accomplish, and the end result to me is pretty powerful things. I'd like to see where we become a center hub for innovation in the entire ESG space. And I think we have a lot of companies lining up that can drive things that could be planet saving, right? There's no environmental impact until you have financial impact. And when you have financial impact and financial mechanisms, versus trying to do it, by regulation and governing, right? That's just almost a non-starter. It's just tough to implement things. But when you put financial incentives behind the things that need to happen, that's where it can be successful. So you could see that level of impact. Again, kind of ESG, world-changing, impacts. And I'd also like to see where everybody in the world controls their own value and controls their own identity information and create value at the bottom of the pyramid for people. And so I mean, blockchain as a whole is truly a world changing concept, and I see Devvio as being a leader in the space.
I think you explained that really well. Let me see. Now, are you able to talk about like existing revenues or existing deals out there? Like a lot of companies in the technology space, they don't have any kind of profits or customers or clients come in for years and years and years. Are you able to share as much as you can with the people that are viewing this, just kind of where you are in that space of lining up real world clients and real world solutions and actually generating revenue in this industry?
Yeah. Revenue is at the forefront of my mind on everything that we do. So again, that's a good question to kind of pull it back from that last answer, right? The last answer is, big visions and we can have, huge impact. But you need to get there in a way that's feasible to continue growing and really do things in a way where you're truly creating something that can be used. And so revenue generation has been, the foundation for setting direction at Devvio. And so we have our digital contact tracing solution that we're deploying. We're deploying with a number of companies, including Fortune 500 companies. And we're looking to have deployment, in tens of thousands of employees. So for example, a business can come to us and say, we want to get our employees back to physical locations. And so actually, here's our digital contact tracing device. You wear it around your neck, and what this does is keeps track of who you're around, and then this device gets associated with your wallet, your public address. And then when we first started looking at that product, we kind of realized we spent 4 years building an amazing privacy solution that can maintain people's identity, and who you're around is private information, right? You don't want a company to be a big brother. So a company can come to us and say, it's important to get people back to physical locations, but we don't want to undermine people's privacy. And so Devvio created a hardware solution. We're working with Avnet, to be able to, get that device out. And then what happens is, people can keep track of who they're around privately. And then if you get sick, then anonymous information can be sent to a hotspot server. And so like if you and I go to lunch, for example, we spend an hour together, and then the next day you test positive for COVID-19, and this expands beyond just COVID, right? We're building an overall safety, solution for businesses. So it can, help people not spread the flu even, right? So the next day you test positive for COVID-19, I'll get a warning that says you were around somebody for an hour yesterday at an average distance of 3 feet. You likely were exposed. You should, self-quarantine and stay away from other people. The HR department can call someone up and say, don't come into work today, and keep someone from coming in and getting everybody else sick. So that product is going really well, and we're deploying it, in a substantial way. We're also working on a number of asset tracking projects. We're tracking things like ESG related assets like carbon offsets and the provenance of data, associated with those. And ultimately these become assets that can be traded on spot markets, things like that. We're also doing projects in cold chain is another big area that we're looking at. And so you can, actually, here's another sensor we have. So this is a sensor that you can, temperature sensor that you can put, in a container. And so if you want to blockchain at its most fundamental level is a large-scale time-ordered database. That's really what blockchain is, right? And so if you're taking temperature measurements of a bunch of different items, whether it's vaccines or blood in cancer treatments, or even food, sandwiches, if you want to maintain records of the temperature throughout its entire supply chain, and if a sandwich thaws and then refreezes, someone gets sick. If a vaccine thaws or goes below a certain temperature and then gets back above that temperature, it becomes ineffective, right? And if a blood cancer treatment, for gene therapy goes below a certain temperature, someone can die, right? And so you can have this large scale time ordered recordings of temperature controlled items that you can audit all of the data, especially in situations where there's risk of death. You can show it to an auditor and regulators and show the provenance of that data. And so we deployed a initial proof of concept that was successful, and we're expanding that part of our business too. So there's a number of areas that are going really well. And then one of the bigger focuses that we have now is expanding in the ESG area as well.
That's phenomenal. If you start to think about all the application of this that are coming forward, like all these business solutions, I was in the military for a while. I was actually a nurse with the military, and so I know like insulin has to be stored cold and other things have to be stored cold, and they can be exposed to room temperature, but you have to monitor that time. And so just the ability now for blockchain to be able to track that stuff so that you're not giving like injectables that have gone bad into people, right? Injecting it right into their body. I mean, that's especially prevalent with the vaccinations, that some of them have to be stored at very cold temperatures and they cannot go to room temperature until they're ready to be injected or they go bad. So
right. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great to see real world solutions coming about there, and Devvio being part of that is pretty exciting. That's all the questions I have for now. Anything else you want to share with the viewers? I'm very grateful for the hour that you've given us.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. We hit most of kind of the main areas of, especially kind of where we're going as a company. Like I said, the team is what I'm most proud of in growing the company. We've built the technical solution that's easy to integrate with that RESTful API. We've brought in revenue, and now we're expanding, in ESG with the new Devi Cryptocurrency and the DevX platform. So we hit most of kind of the most important things. So it was a great interview. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, a lot of my subscribers will be asking me all the time, when Devvio? It's like,
yeah,
right. Coming soon, right?
Yep. Yeah. So. You asked earlier when we're going to have the Devi cryptocurrency go out, and I described it. Kind of depends on the regulatory compliance. Again, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you've rung a bell that you can't unring, right? And so a key to our platform is going to be this regulatory compliance from the beginning, making sure we're not ringing any bells we can't unring, and having, for example, identity integrations tied in from the beginning, those types of things. So there's a few. I could technically launch, anything we want to launch tomorrow. Like we're at a point where almost with the push of a button we can, start up new shards. But when you start looking at trading, tokens, then there's a few other things we need to get in pace. But it's getting close, so it's not far off.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate your time, and thanks so much, Tom.
Great. Thank you, Jared.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Success is falling, flowing like rain. The timing's right, we're getting paid. Come on, rainmakers, let's make this happen.